Welcome, folks, to our animal justice gathering, The Future of Marineland's Whales and Dolphins. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm a campaign strategist for animal justice and the director of Animal Justice Academy. You can find my bio in the chat as well as everybody else's that is going to be speaking here today. I don't want to hold up the proceedings too much by reading long bios. But folks, I think most of you know why we're here. Marineland in Ontario recently threatened to kill the 30 beluga whales in its care unless it receives government funding. And since then, just a lot of our supporters and folks throughout Canada and actually throughout the world have been worried sick and really unsure about what to do next to help the whales, the dolphins, and all the other animals, marine and land animals that are there. So we really felt it was important at this juncture to come together and share with you folks, some of the people that are going to be sort of helping to lead the charge and getting people activated on board, getting government interest, getting your political reps interested. We really wanted to get you get your knowledge up around the concrete plans that we and our friends at other organizations who have also been working closely on the Marineland fiasco for many years now, what we're working on. But before we dive in, just in the spirit of social justice for all, let's just take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous people of all lands that those of us gathering here today and throughout the world are on. In Canada, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. Also, a special acknowledgement to all the civilians in war zones right now. We hold your safety in our hearts and hope deeply for peace. And of course, the billions of animals suffering in the world right now. We gather for all of you tonight. All right, thank you. Now, I want to give you a bit of a lay of the land for this gathering. So we're going to start off by getting to know the speakers a little bit better and their work. Then we're going to give you some context on the long, troubling history of animals at Marineland. We're going to fill you in on everything we know about where things are at now. We're going to take you through a roadmap for what we're proposing as the way forward. Then we're going to take a big but quick, powerful collective action together. Okay, when we've got this many people gathered for animals, folks, we need to take action for those animals. I love that we have a whale emoji. It's wonderful. And then we're hoping to have time to open it up for a few questions. So, all right, let's get to know our panelists for this evening. I'm going to let all the panelists share how they or their organization has been involved with the Marineland animals in the past and what area of the situation right now they're working in. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes each for this. This is going to be hard because many of these folks have had a lot of time and a lot of history with Marineland. And we're going to start, though, with Melissa Matlow, who is the Canadian Campaign Director for World Animal Protection and oversees the delivery of their campaigns to end factory farming and the commercial exploitation of wildlife. We dropped the full bio for Melissa in the chat. And Melissa, you just might have the longest history with Marineland of all of us here on the panel, although you might have to duke that out with Naomi, because you were protesting Marineland as a teen 30 years ago. Give us a little sense of your journey with Marineland.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. This is personal for me, comes full circle as well. I grew up in the Niagara region, so like many people there, I went to Marineland as a kid because my parents took me there, so did my teachers. I trusted they were making the right decisions. But more than 30 years ago, when I was in high school, I met a local organization called Niagara Action for Animals. I hope some of them are listening because a big public shout out for them. They did protests at Marineland every summer. They really opened my eye to the cruelty at Marineland. And changed my views. And it's a big reason why I'm still an animal welfare advocate today. So I joined World Animal Protection in 2005. My first campaign was working on roadside zoos. I learned a lot from Rob Laidlaw and Zoo Check Canada. A big shout out to them. They were doing
shout out to Rob.
They were doing that advocacy back then as well. Much of what I've learned about captive wildlife welfare. I've learned from Rob. I still learn from him and keep
We
learning
all
from
do.
others. We all do. We all do. But that's what I bring to the table is 20 years of doing captive wildlife welfare assessments. We also work with travel companies. We advise them on animal welfare policies, help them remove harmful attractions like Marineland from their supply chain. Proud to say that Canada's leading airline vacation companies have all committed to end the sale of Marineland type places, captive cetacean entertainment. Um, our organization also works to reduce tourist demand through consumer behavior change campaigns. And through that, we're also establishing alternative responsible viewing opportunities through our whale heritage and wildlife heritage networks. These are places that are best practice standards for viewing wildlife in the wild where they belong. And we feel that's pretty important to shift that tourist demand away from captive wildlife facilities towards more ethical alternatives.
Mhm.
What we're doing with Marineland right now, we're urging the Ontario government to step in, provide emergency care for the animals, bring all stakeholders and experts to the table to work on humane solutions because transparency has been one of the biggest issues here is learning what's going on and how we can all help. And of course, number one is also preventing a crisis like this from ever happening again. I hope to speak more about that after. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Oh, by the way, we have a picture of Melissa as a teenager. Let's bring it up. There she is. How old were you
That's
here,
me.
Melissa?
That's my grassroots placard, everyone. I'm
Oh my
dressed as a
goodness.
jailbird. My sister made the costume, and I believe Jennifer Hullett, the executive director of the Walrus magazine, is ironically in the walrus costume.
I love it. Jen's a really good friend of mine. That's how Melissa and I met originally, and I love that she's making an appearance there. Thank you so much, Melissa. Now we have Dr. Naomi Rose. Naomi is the senior scientist for marine mammal biology with the Marine Wildlife Program of the Animal Welfare Institute in Washington, D.C., and also on the board of the Whale Sanctuary Project. Naomi, you also have a long history with Marineland, professionally, not just as a teenager. So give us
Yeah.
the Coles notes on it.
Yeah, I started in this field in 1993. I also know Rob since then. I mean, we first met back then. And I was asked by Zuchek to visit Marineland way back in 1995, 1996. So I've been there several times since. I've protested there. And I've also been very involved simply in rebutting. I would say that's one of my strengths is rebutting the arguments they present to try to justify what they do. And I was very involved in the passage of Bill S-203, and I do work at the international level. I am in Washington, D.C. myself, but I work in China. I have worked in Russia. I work with a coalition of groups in Europe, coalition of groups in China. And I've been to many of the facilities that are in the Caribbean, which is a hot spot for swim with the dolphin facilities. And so, yeah, I've seen John Holler, do his thing where he basically tries to, well, when he was alive, he was not a very nice man. And in my opinion, he was a bit of a collector. He just hoarded animals and hoarded land. And, it was never to the animals' benefit the way he managed to acquire so many individuals. And now there are 30 belugas left from the high of nearly 60 that he had there, and they need a future. So I continue to work with these coalitions, and here in the United States, we've had some successes with the law that was passed in California, and we continue to make what progress we can with legislation. And I am very interested in always coming up with some solid scientific arguments. But of course, I just care about doing what's right for the animals.
Mm. Thank you, Naomi, for your just decades of tireless work on this. We so appreciate you. Okay, we have Camille Lavchuk, who is one of Canada's leading animal rights lawyers and executive director of our Animal Justice, Canada's leading national animal law advocacy organization. Camille, animal justice has a pretty long history with Marineland, unfortunately. Can you give us a some details on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kimberly. Thanks everyone else for being here, all of you watching. Also have a very long history working with most of the folks on this call, stemming back, quite some time now. So I got involved in Marineland almost as soon as I was finishing law school. I was actually approached by some whistleblowers and assisted with the efforts to put Marineland in the Toronto Star back in 2012 when some folks came forward and shared some really troubling information about what they'd seen. And that kicked off a new round of discussion about the ethics of keeping sentient animals like marine mammals in captivity. Uh, Not long after that, Ontario started to consider whether it would ban the captivity of orcas, which was a pretty incredible step and a groundbreaking move as far as legislative work went in North America. And we were involved in supporting that campaign. I think that's where I first met both Naomi and Lori. Of course, after that, the federal government started considering banning not just the captivity of orcas, but all captivity of whales and dolphins. And Animal Justice worked very closely with the legislators who were promoting that campaign, including Senator Wilfred Moore and then Senator Marie Sinclair. That was a very long and hard-fought campaign. I think everybody here on this call played some role in supporting that legislation. And when it passed in 2019, that was a real game changer for reflecting the public's attitudes that were shifting away from thinking that it was appropriate to keep animals like whales and dolphins in captivity and towards the idea that we need to show them greater respect and appreciate who they are and what it does to them to be kept in tanks. So since then, we've been very concerned, of course, that this day would come that Marineland would close, and we've been engaged in a variety of efforts to shape the government's export policy. So as you know, Canada banned whale and dolphin captivity in 2019, but of course allowed for exports if it was in the best interest of the whales. So we've been involved on that front. We've also been monitoring conditions at Marineland, including some of the performances that Marineland was still doing with dolphins, despite performances for entertainment being made unlawful. And I might talk a bit more about that later. And just making sure that law enforcement have complaints every time that new footage at Marineland emerged showing troubling conditions and showing cetaceans in what we considered to be distress. So now with this latest chapter, we've been working closely with the Whale Sanctuary Project, with World Animal Protection, with other organizations to try to help drive policy discussions on what should happen next. And I think Caitlin's going to share a little bit more about that in a bit.
Thank you, Camille. Okay, Dr. Lori Marino is a neuroscientist who has studied dolphin and whale brains, intelligence, and welfare for over 35 years. She's the founder and president of the Whale Sanctuary Project and currently a faculty member in animal studies at New York University. Lori, can you share a little bit about the role you've been playing in the Marineland situation over the years?
Well, I really got to be aware of Marineland during the Canadian S-203 hearings. I was asked to be an expert witness, and I did give testimony. And I really learned a lot about what was going on there. And not only that, not only in terms of the poor animal welfare, but also the fact that despite their claims of being a research institute, they didn't do any research. They didn't contribute anything to science or our knowledge of these animals. And that's what I focused on in my testimony. As I said, I teach captive wild animal welfare at NYU. And a lot of what I do with the Whale Sanctuary Project, as well as generally, is use the science to tell us how these animals are doing in captivity, and they're not doing well. And I'll just put a plug in for a recent paper that my colleagues and I just published in the peer-reviewed journal PeerJ on an update on captive cetaceans welfare, where we essentially conclude that while there have been some little incremental improvements in how we care for dolphins and whales in captivity, especially bottlenose dolphins, that by and large, orcas, belugas, and in general, just cetaceans are still experiencing very poor welfare living in zoos and marine parks. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks for coming up with the idea for WSP. Do you want to just share a quick word on how this idea came to be? Like, you're the founder.
Well, I am the founder,
Mhm.
and that started in 2015, but there are so many people here, Charles Vinnick, Naomi Rose, who quickly came on board and made it what it is today. And the reason I started the whole thing was because I got tired of hearing myself talk about how poor the welfare of these animals is in these places, and thought, gosh, we've got to do something about it. And the result of that is the Whale Sanctuary Project.
Amazing. We're going to hear all about the Whale Sanctuary Project. In fact, we're going to turn to Charles Vinnick, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Whale Sanctuary Project. Charles has a solid background in business that has also involved extensive experience in ocean policy, environmental policy, project management, and government relations. Charles, give us a little background on how you're involved in this whole thing.
Right. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank all of you for coming. Off to all of you, big shout out to all of you.
Yeah.
But some of you may not know that one of the early whales to be at Marineland was Keiko, the whale from the Free Willy movie. When he was captured in Iceland, he was first moved, before going to Mexico City, he was moved to Marineland. Lived there, things didn't work out. He was sold to Radio Aventura in Mexico City, and that's where the film was made. But my experience in this really goes back to some of that. I had the kind of rare privilege of working with Jacques Cousteau and Jean-Michel for some 25, 30 years, managing work around the world with them. And one of the projects that we became heavily involved in, and I had the privilege of managing, was taking Keiko back to his natal waters in Iceland and seeing if it was possible to reintroduce him to the wild. And he had a phenomenal life. Naomi can speak to it the way I do. You'd go there, you'd see him in the ocean, and the waves would be high, the wind would be blowing, it'd be awful for us. And this whale is just sitting up in the water, just loving every minute of it. And so he had a thriving life in the ocean. And I think certainly the 5 years there, Iceland and Norway, may have been the most healthy part of his life. But what we learned is how difficult it is to put a whale back. We've always known how easy it is to capture one. That you can see in the movies. What we learned, how difficult it is to put one back. What do I mean by that? How difficult it is for a whale to join another group of whales because they live in communities so much. They don't live in isolation. That informed all of this idea about sanctuaries. It informed why Lori and I came together, how we agree on how we have to do this work going forward. So the situation today in Marineland is horrible. There's no question whales being threatened with death has no place in any of this. But it's indicative of what's happening around the world. More and more marine parks are going out of business. They're suffering financially. Why? Because all of you, all of us, are voting with our feet and we're not going. So their business model doesn't work. And so as legislation like the landmark legislation in Canada in 2019 is passed, and as these parks get into trouble, we need to have solutions for the animals. The legislation doesn't tend to include a solution. It often grandfathers the parks, but the parks are still in trouble, and the only thing that matters is the animals. So that's what this is all about for us as an organization, but it doesn't matter about our organization. What matters is creating a solution and demonstrating that the welfare of the animals is better in that environment than anything they can have in a concrete tank. So my role is kind of the field stuff, putting things together, making sure we get them done, doing everything we can in that regard, and working with people like all of you on the panel, Lori, and all of our team, but most importantly, finding ways to collaborate with the people who own the parks. They own these animals. Should they own sentient beings? No, of course not, but they do. That gives them rights that we need to deal with. Find ways to collaborate with them. Find the one germ of an idea that we agree on, and that's treating the animals well and focusing on that to find solutions for moving them to environments and homes where they can thrive.
Mm. Thank you, Charles. We're going to hear much more about the Whale Sanctuary Project in a bit. But last and certainly not least, I want to just introduce Caitlin Mitchell, who's the Director of Legal Advocacy at Animal Justice. Caitlin works to stop the spread of ag-gag laws in Canada, to improve legal protections for animals, to defend the rights of animal advocates. And before Animal Justice, Caitlin worked over a decade as a public interest environmental lawyer. So, Caitlin, I know you have been run off your feet in the last couple of months. You've been in the thick of bringing the plan for the marine land whales and dolphins together, around animal justice and a wider collaboration. So tell us a little bit about how you've been involved.
Yeah, it's funny. Leading up to the call, I was trying to think about my entry point into this issue, and I have this really it's a clear memory, but it's a vague memory as a kid of creating protest signs following the Free Willy movie and going to a protest with friends. But I grew up in Winnipeg, so I can't for the life of me imagine what kind of protest there was here. But yeah, it's certainly an issue I've cared deeply about as a child. But I joined Animal Justice in 2019. And actually, when I joined, that's right when S203 had passed. And so we were starting to work on issues around export permits and what those should look like and what those shouldn't look like. So it's an issue that I've been working on since starting with the group. And then, of course, recently we've been working hard as soon as we learned about the proposal to transport all of the whales to China. We worked really hard to learn more about that facility to assess whether it was a good idea for the whales, quickly concluded it was not, and worked really hard to pull as much information together as we could to inform decision makers. And now that that decision went in the right direction, I think, with the minister refusing to issue the permits, we've been trying to put forward solutions and working with government to identify what can actually be done to help these animals.
Thank you, Caitlin. So, folks, what we want to do is we want to give you just a little bit more context. You got some history there, but some of you are entering this Marineland saga fairly recently. So we just want to sort of give you a brief overview of the history of Marineland's animals that they've held captive. Melissa, I'm gonna throw it to you to sort of start some of the earlier days.
Sure. Okay. I'm not that old as when the Marineland opened up, but when they opened up in 1961, just a couple of years later, there was a sea lion named Jeff that escaped, bit the owner while being recaptured. And I've got to say that there's been complaints and controversies following this park ever since. I think the documentaries like Blackfish and Free Willy really created a big shift and increasing public awareness and understanding and changing attitudes towards these parks. There were certainly decades of protests before that, but that was a huge shift. I like to say the tide was turning, pun intended. And certainly the Toronto Star expose, which Camille talked about, was huge at shining a spotlight thanks to whistleblowers in the park, talking about mass mortality, mass graves, water quality issues, things that, if you went in quickly and observed the animals for a day, you wouldn't necessarily see. So I think that was huge in the advocacy on Marineland.
Thank you. Yeah. So, do we know what year that was, the Toronto Star expose?
That was
That was
2012. Yeah.
Yeah, 2012. It just seems like yesterday. And so, whistleblower named Phil Demers first came on out to do that, and then all hell broke loose. And then Camille, can you take it from there?
Yeah, so as Melissa mentioned, the blackfish effect was real. We started seeing jurisdictions wanting to pass laws to restrict this activity that people were starting to see as very, very harmful. So Bill S-203, which prohibited keeping whales and dolphins in tanks in the future, and it prohibited the breeding of whales and dolphins who were already in tanks. It grandfathered or exempted the whales and dolphins who were currently possessed by places like Marineland or the Vancouver Aquarium. Those were the only two facilities left by this point when the law passed in 2019. So it was pretty stunning. It was one of the most groundbreaking laws that we've seen globally restricting these activities. And the owner of Marineland, as Melissa mentioned, John Holer, he'd actually passed away about a year before the law came into effect. So the ownership transferred to his wife, Marie Holer, and she has passed away now as well. So after the bill passed, I think a number of us started seeing the writing on the wall. The parking lot at Marineland was frequently empty. People's opinions were just very obviously turning against Marineland and marine parks and keeping animals like whales and dolphins in captivity. And information about what was going on inside the walls of the park continued to emerge, and it was all quite troubling. So even before the bill passed, there had been many, many concerns over many decades from organizations that were driving advocacy on this, like the local group Melissa mentioned, Niagara Action for Animals, ZooCheck as well, many, many others. We saw some charges laid against Marineland for what I believe is the first time in about 2016 over the treatment of some birds who were in the care of Marineland. Those charges were eventually withdrawn. Um, After the bill to ban whale and dolphin captivity passed, as I mentioned, it also included a ban on using those animals in entertainment performances. Marineland continued to use whales and dolphins in shows. I actually went to one of those shows and filmed it. The show featured dolphins spinning in the air. There was some interpretive commentary from trainers or announcers, and dolphins, engaging with music, including the song Mambo Number 5. So did that look like entertainment? It sure did. The police in the Niagara region received a complaint and actually laid a charge against Marineland under the criminal code for violating that law. The charge was later withdrawn. A couple charges finally, one charge finally did stick. Marineland was convicted last summer, actually, of disobeying an order from animal welfare inspectors to improve the conditions of some bears who were kept in its care, and they were ordered to pay $85,000 in costs. So at least one prosecution did stick, but we just continue to see very troubling videos featuring Kiska, the sole surviving orca who lived in solitary confinement at Marineland, slamming her body against the wall and sometimes floating listlessly in tanks. And according to scientific evidence, it was clear that distress was engaged here. So there were many complaints filed against Marineland by us and others. We knew that animals were continuing to die at Marineland. Since the bill passed, there's now been 20 confirmed deaths of whales and many other mammals, both marine and land animals as well. So the reports of poor conditions continued to mount. Animal welfare inspectors claimed to have been at Marineland regularly, but Melissa mentioned transparency earlier and its importance in this process. One thing we've never really been able to determine is what the inspectors and the agency were doing at Marineland and what those conditions actually were like. We do know, based on some court documents that came out, that at one point Marineland the animal welfare inspectors declared that the water quality at Marineland was so poor that all of the animals were in distress. So that was certainly troubling, but we've never been able to find out much more. But of course, we were all concerned, I think, on this call that one day we would get to this point where Marineland was going to close. It didn't open up again after its end date last summer, so this entire 2025 season that's been closed. And we've been hearing rumors and reports for quite some time that they were trying to sell the belugas to China. We're very appreciative of the federal government for taking seriously its role in rejecting those export permits to China, because the facility was not something that would have been in the best interests of those whales. So that kind of takes us up to today.
So, Caitlin, the transfer to the Chinese aquarium Chimelong was turned down, and that's when things got really scary. Can you take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were really pleased that the minister did the right thing and denied those permits. I actually think as a lawyer that she didn't even have legal authority to issue them in the first place, because the way that the law stands now, you cannot actually export animals unless it's for valid scientific research or it's in their best interests. And this move was clearly not in their best interests. So it was the right decision. But then, as you said, and as I think Charles mentioned earlier, Marineland really did hit a new low after that. We knew that they'd come out swinging after the refusal, but I honestly didn't expect them to so quickly say that unless the federal government gave them money, that they would consider killing all 30 of the whales, which was shocking, really startling. There were a lot of, weekend and evening phone calls with folks trying to figure out what's going on. What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen? So yeah, so a lot's been going on since then. And as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that we've been really actively trying to do since then is work through what actually is possible here. Because I don't think that the only two options are send them to a facility in China or kill them. There are other options. And of course, now that the sanctuary has received the approvals from the province, that's even more realistic. But all the way along, we've been saying, no, there are other options, and let's put those details together and let's pull together the stakeholders that need to be there and come up with a real solution and a real plan for these animals.
Caitlin, can you tell us just a little bit more about this Nova Scotia approval? Like this was a big win, right? This was a big thing that happened.
It's a huge win. And I think, Charles and Lori can probably speak to it even more than I can, but it was amazing news. The Nova Scotia government announced that it would be granting the Crown lands lease that is needed to enable the sanctuary to proceed. And I know it was a long time coming because Charles and Lori and others have been working so hard to do all that they can to get the project off the ground.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of come to you, Charles. So, you have been working so diligently at the whale sanctuary project, laying the groundwork and trying to move this along and getting permission for many years now. Tell us about that. Tell us about how the Nova Scotia approval has changed things.
Well, what we received is called an order in council. So that's a cabinet decision that confirms the recommendation of the Minister of Natural Resources that the lease be provided to us for Crown land. So what's Crown land? That's the water behind me. The water behind me is the sanctuary waters. Crown land is the submerged land under the water, and the tip of that island, which is Barashwa Island, is included. That's owned by the Crown, owned by the government. So in order to do a project in the water, you need a lease from the government for the water space. So the water space that is part of our lease, including the island, is a little over 80 hectares, a little over little 80 hectares, a little over 200 acres of water space. And so that approval gives us the authority to now move forward and do all the work in the water that you need to do to create a sanctuary. What is that? Certainly, it's putting a net in the water. In the case of our net, it's a little over a mile of net linearly, moving from zero depth to 45 feet, 45, 48 feet. And so it has quite a bit of variety of depth. It's an environment that is very vibrant. So what's taken all this time? More than 3 years of environmental impact analysis to know, is this the right place for the whales? Is it an environment in which they will thrive? Conversely, will the whale's presence have any impact on the environmental quality of the water space? So starting in 2020, we began as we found this site. And I might add, we didn't find the site. We were doing community meetings all along the 7,000 kilometers of the south and eastern shore of Nova Scotia. We got to the town of Port Hilford, and in the town meeting, one of the women got up and said, the belugas have to be here. They actually had signs up and down the streets. Belugas belong here. And out of that meeting, they, along with the local fishers, identified this site that we couldn't actually see driving down the coastline because it's rural and we don't see it. So the community brought the site to us. We had looked at over 130 sites in North America, Washington State, British Columbia, and Nova Scotia. This was the site that most met all of the criteria for water quality, for depth, for lack of pack ice, for all of the physical criteria we needed. But our due diligence required the studies of water quality, all of the environmental impact analyses that came, and then, of course, all of the agencies, every provincial agency from the Environment Department, Natural Resources Department, all of these have a say in approving a lease. Similarly, in Canada, rightfully so, there's First Nation consultation. We as a proponent can do informal consultation, but the formal consultation is government to government. So Lori and I met with all of the bands, each of them. We did more community meetings. All of that is about building the support locally for the project, because it may be the Whale Sanctuary Project that's the proponent, but this is a project that the community has to embrace in every way. We certainly had some people who were not in favor. One example of that was we have a very rural road. It's a gravel road going to the site. There are a few year-round houses, a number of summer cottages along the road. People were concerned about traffic. So in a community meeting, we said, well, we won't bring the public down that road. We'll do a public interpretation center on the other side, on the far side you see behind me, of the bay. And with telescopes, with underwater cameras, with audio systems and the like, they will experience the whales from a distance, but we won't use that road. So we looked for ways to work with the community in every way. It's been a long haul, but in fact, every big project, I mean, this is the first one of this size anywhere in the world. Every big project has hurdles. We have now reached a milestone. We're able to move forward with this offer in council. We are in the process of finalizing the lease paperwork and can now move forward actively in ways we'll talk about in the coming little while in this meeting to welcome whales. That's what it's all been about. Been a long haul, but everything takes time. I'm an old guy. I mean, I had dark hair when we started this. And so, this is the time to move it forward.
Yeah, it's incredible. Lori, what was it like seeing that bay for the first time? And like, was it a pretty exciting? Oh, you're muted, Lori. Yeah.
When we drove through the trees and arrived at this bay, it was so clear to me that this was a place where belugas, any whales could be happy. It's beautiful. It's big. There are gorgeous trees and rocky sides to it. And it's just become something that when you look at it, you understand why we want to build a sanctuary there. I've been on the boat and gone all over that bay. It's huge. And as Charles said, the amount of space that the belugas will have is an order of magnitude greater than the largest tank in the world, or order of magnitude. And the thing about this that I want to say is that when you look at it, it's got all the natural beauty and everything that goes in the ocean, but we will also be providing everything that these animals need to thrive. We're not going to just dump them in there and say, have a good life. We're going to have a medical pen. We're going to have a smaller area where they can live initially until we know that they're ready to go out into the larger area. There'll be veterinary care. There'll be all kinds of things. So everything that they need and have in captivity, they will have. But what they will have for the first time in their lives is a natural setting. And that, we believe, is going to be the thing that makes the difference, because their brains and their bodies have been waiting for that input for a very long time. And this is a beautiful place to care for them, but also give them uh, what they need to thrive.
They receive all the same care in every way that they've ever
Exactly.
had in a park.
Exactly.
Full-time veterinary care, full-time training staff, animal caregivers, all of the support systems that they need.
Mhm.
Plus, they have a vibrant natural environment that gives them the stimulation that we see in all the pictures that don't exist in a park, don't exist in a concrete tank. So it's the best of what they've had and everything else that we can provide.
Plus, right.
And Charles, just so that folks are clear on this, this announcement by the Nova Scotia government really has supersedes all the rest of the consents that were still lingering. There's no need, like you don't have to get any further landowner consents. Like we're ready to go on this right now. There's no more red tape.
Yeah, that's right. This gives us the ability to move forward on construction in the water space. That's what I mentioned earlier. So what will be there? I mean, picture in your mind's eye, what are we talking about? So 100 acres netted off for the whales. But within that, I mean, that's a big space, 100 plus times larger than anywhere they've ever been. When we first had Keiko going out of a netted enclosure into the bay, he'd look through the net. I don't know, that's a little scary. I'm not going out there yet because it's new. So you also have smaller bay pens in which the animals can be acclimated to this larger space and to which they come back as they need care individually or collectively. So you have smaller bay pens that also have to be fabricated adjacent to the current wharf. You have a medical lift. If you need to care for an animal, you need to be able to raise it up so it's neutrally buoyant, but the veterinarians can be standing adjacent to it. That requires technology. So there's all kinds of technical elements that get built into it. But this lease gives us the opportunity to move forward. People ask about Transport Canada. Well, of course, Transport Canada has to approve putting a net in the water because it's an impediment to transport. It's an impediment to navigation. Well, we've been meeting with them for years. They fully have signed off on all of what we're doing. Otherwise, we couldn't have reached this point. Similarly, DFO is worried about a number of things. DFO wants to know what are the impacts on the benthic environment, on the submerged soil. All of that has been submitted to them and approved. But DFO will always have one more step. You have to have a transfer license from DFO to bring a cetacean into a province. But you can't apply for that license until you have a specific animal for whom to apply for. So we've seen the wonderful pictures of all 30 belugas. They are all individuals. As we move forward with the plan we'll talk about, we would apply on an individual case-by-case basis for a transfer license from each and every one of them. So when people ask the question, has DFO signed off on all parts except the transfer license, which we haven't applied for? We'll apply on a whale-by-whale basis. So yes, this allows us to move forward. We have 30 acres of land adjacent to this that we are purchasing. The funds have been in escrow for a couple of years for that purchase. we didn't want to turn the switch until we received this approval for the water space. And then we go hand in hand, construction on land and construction at sea.
So, Charles, how soon could we see whales swimming in that bay?
Not tomorrow.
I
But
was
on
kind of thinking maybe
Thursday,
not.
we ought to know. So this, we've been looking at plans, and people criticize me all the time. Charles, you said there would be whales there in 2023. You said in 2024. Yes. And I'll keep it being that optimistic forever. If you don't have a plan and you don't have an aggressive plan, you get nothing done. And so is it a tall order to say we can bring whales by next summer? Absolutely, it's a tall order. It requires a lot of money. We'll talk about that. It requires a lot of work. But it can be done. We have outlined an 8 to 9 month plan that if we are working and spending roughly $1.5 million a month over the next 8 to 9 months, we can be ready to welcome whales next summer. Now, as I say, that's a tall order. But look, we've got, I don't know, what, 500 people, more than 526 people sitting here with us tonight.
We're packing our suitcases, Charles.
What does it take for creative people around the world to come together and say, these belugas need our help? And can we come together in ways we might never come together otherwise to do something that's never been done before? And the answer is, of course, yes. It happens all the time in other arenas. It's happened on land for elephants, for big cats and chimpanzees. It hasn't yet happened for cetaceans other than Sea Life Trust in Klettsvik in Iceland, where they are working to bring 2 belugas into that bay. It's a difficult bay. They're working hard. We're all collaborating together. We work with them all the time. They're working with us on this. But can it be done? It can. It will take more than Lori and me and Naomi and our team and the 6 of us, 7 of us in the spotlight. But it will take a global effort to do it. But it is doable if we all decide we're doing it together.
And it has to be done. It just
There you
has
go.
to be done.
And so so you can take up to 10 of the whales, from what I understand. 8 to 10 is what you're looking at. And so we're gonna loop back around to you folks in just a second, but now we need to sort of, with this super exciting news of the approval of the sanctuary and no more red tape to be slowing things down. We also have, and the fact that they can take up to 10. We need to address some of the imminent concerns for the whale's safety right now at Marineland, okay? Because if you can get it done by 2026, Charles, I'm gonna take you and give you the biggest kiss ever. And but we also need to take care of these animals that from all reports are not doing well. So Camille, the deadline that Marineland set for getting money from the government has come and gone. They said, unless the government gets us money, we're gonna kill these whales. Where do we think things are at with that threat?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. I don't think anybody has taken Marineland's threat to heart very seriously. I think that they would have enormous barriers to actually carrying out a mass killing of those whales. We've heard a number of things, first of all, which one of those things is that the staff that work out Marineland were quite upset by this threat. Those are staff who have bonded with the animals, who have a very strong relationship with them, who are certainly concerned over them and would not want to see them die. So that's doubtful that Marineland would even have the staff to do that. Whether they would be able to find a veterinarian who was willing to carry out a mass killing simply for Marineland's economic convenience is another question. Veterinarians go to veterinary school often to help animals, not to be responsible for Marineland's finances. Animal Justice has also filed a complaint with Niagara Police because there are concerns that if such a killing were to take place, that it would be an unspeakably awful massacre and that the killings would likely need to be done within close proximity of living animals because of the design of the tanks. It's not easy to kill animals who don't want to die, and according to experts' information, it's not easy to kill belugas either. There's also some question about the state of Marineland's finances. They've never been transparent with the public about what funds they have. They did go before the city of Niagara last winter, and they asked for permission to sever a parcel of land that they own that Marineland sits on, with the idea of leveraging one of those parcels to seek financing to care and remove the whales. Our understanding is that that severance has sort of finally gone through on the paperwork, and that Marineland has continued to say that they are in a position to seek financing and that financing is available. So even though it's possible they are currently cash poor, they are likely sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars or maybe more in property. So there are adequate resources.
Naomi, I know this isn't, it's not great. It hurts to talk about this, but how can you give us some sense of how impossible a mass euthanasia of all these whales could be?
I can't even imagine how they would carry it out. We're talking 30 large cetaceans with limited space at the current, Marineland. They have Friendship Cove, Arctic Cove, and King Waldorf Stadium, and they'd have to move the whales around if they wanted to keep the living away from the dead. And that would be outrageously stressful. They can hear each other through the water, sometimes through the substrate and in air. And so I suspect quite strongly the living would know that others are dying. And they certainly understand that concept. These are intelligent, socially aware, self-aware animals. And so I can't even imagine, even if they got 30 vets and they all injected them at the same time, which again is just a concept I can't even imagine them doing, they would all know they're all dying. It's not going to be instant, and they will communicate, and it will be really rather awful. If they do it in sequence, it's just too horrible to contemplate.
Yeah, thank you, Naomi. Yeah, I imagine almost everybody here feels a little sick to their stomach even thinking about this. So Caitlin, we also don't know how much their health has deteriorated. What can we do to find this out, and what can we do to safeguard their health and safety immediately? What's the plan? Would we be looking to local police, provincial government, federal government? What do we need to do first?
Well, the short answer is we really need Ontario to step up to the plate here. As you've already said, we just don't know the health status of all 30 of these individual animals, as well as, the 4 dolphins and of course land animals. But focusing here on the whales, we just don't know. We don't know how healthy they are. So urgently what's needed is a team of experts, independent experts, to conduct thorough individualized health assessments of each animal, and also immediately take steps to improve conditions at the facility. And to be clear, Ontario has the authority to do that under the province's Animal Welfare Services Act, or PAWS Act. When inspectors find an animal in distress, they have power to immediately provide care to relieve distress. So, we're talking about belugas, it's complicated, but, imagine I have 30 cows and inspectors come and they see that these cows are in distress. Well, they don't just have the power to come and observe that or test that. They have the power to provide the veterinary care needed to improve the conditions that those cows are in. The same thing with belugas. So what we need is for Ontario Animal Welfare Services to come in, exercise its clear authority under the PAWS Act, and send Marineland the bill. That's another clearly, it's set out in the law that they have the authority to do that. They send a bill of costs. If Marineland can't pay now, then as Camila already alluded to, there are really significant land assets and property assets. So there certainly would be a reimbursement opportunity in the future. So before we can answer the question that Charles posed around, which of these whales are suitable, we have to know what their health status is. That will inform all planning going forward. So that really is something that we're stressing right now, is the urgent need to get in there, assess their health, and make meaningful improvements now to the conditions that they're living in.
And if
No,
I
I'm,
could just add
yeah,
one
please.
point, that's all 100% correct. And the authority is so clear and exercised really, really frequently in the case of other animals. Let me just give you one recent example. Ontario seized a lot of dogs from a dog sledding operation. The dog sledding operation was keeping the dogs in inadequate conditions. Ontario took them, improved their health, and sent the bill to the dog sledding operation. It was called Windrift, and that bill totaled close to $1.5 million. Windrift challenged that bill. That bill was upheld. This is a power that is there and it is used regularly.
Mm. And we actually have, at some point, Premier Doug Ford has mentioned that he's concerned with the animals at Marineland. So where is the log jam here? What would stop the Ontario government from moving forward and doing this seizure? And I know I'm asking you to get into their heads, but what would be some of the theories? Caitlin or Camille
Yeah. I mean, I would,
or
I
Naomi?
would, I would say it's just that they're overwhelmed
Mhm.
by the issue. It's not dogs and cats where you can take them and put them somewhere. It's 30 whales, and they have no idea how to deal with this.
Mhm.
So
I think,
they decide not to deal with it.
yeah, I mean, I think the idea of stepping in, taking responsibility for the lives of these highly specialized mammals, and what if one or two or three or five die, then, the government isn't brave. Governments don't tend to be brave about that sort of thing, and they don't want it on their head, to be responsible for these 30 large mammals. And I appreciate that, I really do, but that's their job. And Marineland, it's their responsibility. They are accountable for bringing so many of these animals into the country. And what they're doing right now is abandoning the responsibility they brought on themselves. And, these are long-lived animals. They live as long as we do. So, it was a lifelong commitment, literally, a lifelong commitment for the humans who chose to exploit these animals. John Holler's gone, Marie Holler's gone, but somebody still owns Marineland, and they are absolving themselves of responsibility, which is, of course, not their right. They are responsible for these animals.
And if I can add, the reason
Absolutely.
why Marineland has amassed so many animals, at one time, I think they had more than 50, 55 beluga whales, 4,000 other animals, many land animals that we haven't talked about yet, is because Ontario is the weakest jurisdiction in Canada when it comes to captive wildlife regulations. You don't need a license, you don't need a reason, a higher purpose for keeping these animals. You don't need experience. There's no breeding restrictions if you're substandard. And you don't need an emergency plan in the event of a sudden closure, which, had we had proactive zoo licensing regulations that exist in other provinces, we wouldn't be in this crisis. And I think we have to learn from this situation. And that's where the Ontario government is also accountable.
Mm.
Mhm.
So, uh, you said, Naomi, that governments don't tend to be terribly courageous, but when they get courageous is when there's pressure on them. And they also get a lot more courageous when there is a really solid plan presented to them, which is what we have been working on. And so let's talk a little bit more in just a second about how we put pressure on them. But first, Caitlin, can you take us through this roadmap? Can you start it off? So if we were to get the Ontario government to get in there, get those independent assessments, what's the plan for the whales that we're putting forward?
Yeah, as I said, it's so hard because we don't know their health status. But the way that I conceptualize of it, which is, a very non-scientific, lawyerly way, is I sort of see there's three categories of animals, right? So the best case scenario that we've been talking about is we get in there, there's individual health assessments, and there are 10 whales who are healthy for transport. They're suited to a sanctuary. So those 10 whales have hopefully an amazing future. Now, there's another group of whales, in theory, who may be healthy enough for transport. Maybe there's not room for them, unfortunately, in sanctuaries. I know there other folks have come up since this story hit the news, including, a smaller town in Newfoundland has come forward saying maybe we could have a sanctuary. So, there's possibilities. It's very early stages, but we have to find somewhere else for those other whales to go, probably. And I think that even though this situation feels so urgent, it's so important that we keep our eye on what the law says. And the law says you cannot export them just because it's in their, current owner's financial best interest. You can only do that if it's in their best interest. So we would still need to find facilities where it would be meaningful improvements to their living conditions and health, where they will not be bred in captivity. That's illegal in Canada. So there are still really important questions to ask. It can't simply be, we'll send them wherever we'll take them. We really need to think long and hard about it and assess all options. And we need independent experts to do that. So that's kind of the second group. And then unfortunately, I think, I hope I'm wrong, but all evidence kind of points to the contrary. There may be a third group, and that third group may not be healthy enough to be transported anywhere. Maybe just not now. Maybe they could be brought back to better health. But maybe they can't be. Stress from transport is a really real risk. We've seen that play out in past transfers. So I think we do also need to be alive to the fact that there may be some animals who cannot be moved. And then we need to ask really hard questions about, okay, well, how do we give them the best possible life in place? Certainly that doesn't mean leaving them in their existing tanks. There have been public reports that they're quite literally crumbling. So we need a plan to actually improve those conditions and allow these animals to live the best lives they can. For some of them, as I said, it might be great. They get to live their days in a sanctuary. For others, it might be the least worst option, which I realize is not what we all want to hear, but I think it's realistic.
I do also
question-
think, and I'll be the brave person who actually
Yes.
states this, a fourth group, which I hope is zero or vanishingly small, who may be in such poor condition that euthanasia does have to be considered. But that's not a decision for us to make. That is a decision for these individual veterinary assessments. And so we go back to that is the first step. The lack of transparency about the health of these animals is untenable. It's not helping anybody. It's not helping Marineland. They're not doing themselves any favors by refusing to allow an independent veterinary assessment of these animals. And, again, I hope that the number on this fourth group is zero. But I just want everybody to understand that, we have to keep our minds open to all possibilities. I'm trying to manage expectations here, basically.
And the
Thank you,
process that
Naomi.
Caitlin has described and we've all talked about, where we start with independent health evaluations of each and every one of them. We talk about 30, but it is 30 individuals, and they each have a different history. They each have a different health parameter, health evaluation. That's the first step. But it needs to be immediately followed by our having on site, not independent, but to work hand in hand with the trainers, the animal care staff that are on site at Marineland who love these animals. I've never met a trainer anywhere. I may disagree about all kinds of things they do. I've never met one who doesn't love the animals under their care. So we would work with them, add to that group with people on our team or teams we would bring together collectively to care for them on site, including band-aiding together the life support systems that are clearly failing, that are in bad shape, but likely can be band-aided together. We had to do that at the Miami Seaquarium a couple of years ago. Every filter had to be replaced, sand filters replaced with glass, all that stuff. It can be done. And so that's a part of this plan as well. We start with the veterinary work. We have an on-site engagement with Marineland. It takes Marineland to collaborate in some way, or at least the teams that are working there. Then we make individual rehoming decisions for each. And hopefully some of those can come to sanctuary as we move forward, raise the money and do all the work to get that done on time. But we do it individually for each. And so who has to come together? PAWS, the Provincial Animal Welfare Agency, has to convene this. They have to be the lead agency. The feds can probably play a role. Here's an American talking about what the feds can do. Listen to Caitlin, listen to Camille. Don't listen to Charles about that. But let's bring the government together. Marineland to the table. They have to be there. They own the animals. The zoo and veterinary community that has said they want to help, they should be at the table, along with the NGOs and others. And collectively, we figure out how to move a plan like this forward step by step, because the whales demand it, need it, and deserve it.
And that's certainly a role that the provincial government can play. You know, they have the authority, they have the gravitas, they have the, the power to tell all the stakeholders, the ones that Charles has just outlined, you have to come to the table. We got to figure this out. So we're inviting you all to come to the table. Here's an invitation. It'll be here, at this date, or, maybe canvass everybody and get a good date. And we all go to talk about this. This is where we're siloed right now. And we're all talking through our hats because Marineland isn't at the table at all. And so the provincial government is the obvious party to pull all the stakeholders together and talk turkey, be realistic, actually have a real discussion with real data, with real facts, with real information. And, talk about everybody coming out smelling like roses. I mean, Marineland is not doing itself any favors by not agreeing to this.
Mhm. And so that is what, so Caitlin, Animal Justice has this roadmap that we've just discussed that is being basically shown and shared with government officials. And so far, what kind of reaction are we getting?
Well, I think it's interesting because I do think that on a personal level, almost everybody that you can speak to, I mean, everyone, look at the numbers on this call, right? Everyone gets it and gets the importance of this. I think that it's a question of, as happens so many times in politics and in life, whose jurisdiction, right? We've all seen in the news the certain officials in Ontario pointing the finger and saying, well, the feds had better come up with a solution then if they're going to reject this permit that Marineland's applied for. And then we have the feds saying, well, like, we can't actually even physically enter this facility. We don't have the jurisdiction. It's your provincial statute. So I think we need to get over that hurdle and really just come up with a practical solution. I think that the premier has said publicly multiple times that he genuinely cares about these animals, and I have to believe that. So I think it's a matter of getting the political will and bringing others along for that ride and getting them on board to see that, yes, we can do it. Yes, it's going to be complicated, but if we do nothing, it's going to be worse. We're going to see, if not a mass killing of 30 whales, we're going to see another one die in the coming months, probably. I hope that I'm wrong, but that seems to be how it's playing out, right? And the next time that happens, it's not going to look good. So I think that message also has to come through, which is, yes, doing something is hard, but doing something is better than doing nothing. Doing nothing is going to look really bad. And I think there is a role for both governments. I think the feds have a role here in bringing folks together as well, although the problem does ultimately lie at the feet of the province in many ways. We're also talking about interprovincial transfers, so that's a federal role. So, it's a complex problem. Everyone needs to be at the table.
We need provincial leadership, no more passing the buck. And I think it's definitely hard for the government to do, but we're all here to support them. And I think we've proven that. And not only the people on this panel, I've been so uplifted by all the people coming out and saying, I want to help, independent vets that want to fundraise for filtration systems. Yes, I think Marineland should be held accountable, but there are people who are willing to fundraise for sanctuary solutions and other things. The mayor in Bergio, which Caitlin mentioned, that wants to create a seaside sanctuary. That's the kind of humane innovation that we need out there, and it's really inspiring.
We actually, there's been another really interesting proposal that has come up too around the Marineland, and we're going to get to that in a second. We're also going to get to some questions, but I need to do a little bit of housekeeping here because we're about to take an action. So, folks, if you have questions that have not been answered, and I still have many more to pose to folks, I'm going to asked. You just need to email academy@animaljustice.ca, and Michelle will put that in there. Thank you, Michelle. And just email us your question. The shorter, the better. Have more of a chance of getting answered. And we will be monitoring that email. And closer to the end, we will be answering questions. I also am going to do a lightning round of questions of things that people have been asking about in our supporter base and in the animal advocacy community. But before we do that, folks, I feel like we're ready. We know why we have to target the Ontario government right now, why we need to get them on board. So what I'd like to take is I'd like to take about 3 minutes for all of us to do an action together. When we have over 500 people together in a live event who care for these animals, I think it's a really important thing to take action. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask folks to pick up their phone if they can, if they're not watching this on the phone. And what we're going to ask folks to do is one of two things. We are going to put in Premier Doug Ford's office phone number here. And we have all of the instructions for you in this document that Michelle said. But first of all, you can call Premier Doug Ford. You're not going to have to worry. It's going to be voicemail after 5 p.m. But we are going to ask you to just leave a very quick message that says, my name is, I'm basically distressed over the dire situation of animals at Marineland. I know Premier Ford has mentioned also being concerned. Can you please intervene in this situation? Okay. You could say more if you want. You can say send in independent experts to assess the whales and the other animals help, improve the conditions. But let's do this, make it polite, make it uplifting. Let's see if we can make the Ontario government the heroes of this story. And the other thing I'm going to ask is that if you are an Ontario resident, you have an even more specific job. We're going to ask you right now to call your MPP. And again, it's after hours, so you're just going to be leaving a voicemail, super easy. But I'll tell you, the power of a phone call is immense, okay? It's immense, folks. They need to be hearing about this in order for there to be talk, in order for there to be pressure coming from all arenas of the Ontario government. So if you are an Ontario resident, your instructions were just put into chat. You're going to find your MPP using your address or postal code at that link. You are going to call and leave a voicemail and the same kind of thing. My name is, make sure you say, I'm a constituent of yours. You can say, once again, I'm distressed over this dire situation. I want to see the Ontario government intervene. Could you be a leader in this? Could you help make it happen? Okay, so folks, I am going to give you like 2 minutes right now, and I don't want any excuses. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it. I'm tired. Every phone call matters. You come here, you are showing your support. And so now is the time to take action. Okay. So we're going to put some music on. I'm going to get everybody to do phone calls. I'm going to be looking at the gallery to see how it's going and to get a better sense of people picking up their phones and doing this. So folks, grab those phones And if you are not wanting to phone, and that's absolutely the last thing you want to do, scratch yourself off an email right now, a custom designed email, either to the to your MPP or to Doug Ford. I don't think we have the email addresses here, but if you go to the contact, you can find that. Okay, so let's put on some music. Kirsten, we're going to give you folks 2 minutes to do this. I'm seeing phones out. Love it. Let's not let them down. Let's not let a little bit of shyness. Let the whales down. Let the animals at Marineland down, folks. 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be fancy. And if you're having any troubles or you have anything to report, feel free to message me privately. I love seeing phones up. I love seeing people talking. Can we put the those numbers up again? They're in the chat, Robin. But if you're looking for the number for Premier Doug Ford, 416-325-1941. I'd love to hear, are you getting voice mails, folks? Are you getting the messages? Some people focusing. Oh, you're wonderful people. And all you folks without your video on, I know if you're calling or not. Okay, I'm hearing that some folks are on hold. That's right, so getting jazz music. Okay, so folks that are on hold, just maybe stay on hold, keep the speaker on. And those that are calling their MPP shouldn't be on hold. So if you're in Ontario, make sure that you're calling your MPP. Okay, folks, I want everybody who has taken action, is on the phone, or has left a message, is waiting to give me a thumbs up with the emojis. Nice, love it. Okay, I love it. Oh, you folks are the best. Okay, let's bring the music out, Kirsten. Oh my God, look at all those hands, all those thumbs up. Keep going, folks, keep going. Keep your ear on one and keep an ear on the other. And that's called taking action in a deliberate way. Love it. Thank you so much. Panelists, that feels good, huh? Seeing all those thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Amazing.
Now, so what we're gonna do is, Michelle, can you put the instruction document one more time into the chat? So if you didn't have a chance to do that, or if you were on your phone watching the Zoom, we're putting all this information into the chat one more time with a link that has all of the stuff, the script, extra talking points if you want, any of the links that you're going to need. Okay. So what I'm going to invite everybody to do, and this is just to keep this going. Okay. They're not going to know what hit them tomorrow at Ford's office. So that's going to be awesome. But we'd like to keep the ball going. Okay. So here's the plan. Listen carefully. I'm going to ask everybody that is in this gathering to make one more call during the day to Premier Ford's office. Okay, a second time. If you get through with a voicemail, no worries. Do it a second time, but during office hours before 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm going to ask that you phone on a day assigned to your last name. So if your last name begins with the letters A, B, C, and D, you're going to call tomorrow. If your last name starts with E, F, G, listen, H, I, you're going to call Thursday. If your name is J to M, starts with J to M, call Friday. If your last name starts with an N all the way to an R, call Monday. If your last name is S to V, call Tuesday. And if you're W to Z, call Wednesday. Again, this is all in that document. So if you forgot, if it went too fast, those are your marching orders. Can I just see show of hands? Are you willing to do that second call, folks? Just you can give me your physical hands. Okay, love it. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, let's keep them hearing about this. If for the next week they're hearing every day from a whole bunch of people, I love it. It's going to be amazing. Okay, thank you very much, folks. Excellent work. So back to where we were at here. What I had mentioned is that there is also another sort of idea that's come to the fore, and this is just to give you an idea of all of the ingenuity that's coming, as the pressure is on and as these animals are in such distress. So there's also been another last minute proposal thrown into the mix, a proposal for Marineland to be turned into a retail complex, which would also involve being able to provide sanctuaries for some of the animals. So we actually have Leah Caruso from NAP Capital Management who's come up with this plan, and I just want to give her a couple of minutes to be able to talk about the project. Kirsten, can you spotlight Leah for us?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kimberly, for the time. I appreciate it. And also thank you to this entire community. I've spoken to many of you, and the open arms has been so amazing. And it just kind of shows the willingness of this community to think outside the box and try and come up with alternate solutions, because there's no one solution at this point. Pardon me. So as Kimberly said, I'm part of NAP Capital Management, which is a real estate firm. And what's a real estate firm doing on a call like this? We've been engaged on the Marineland site since early 2025. And what started off as a land sale kind of morphed into something much more important, obviously. Our ethos here at KCM has always been to make sure that real estate does not trump all living things. I'm sorry, I said Trump. That's terrible as an American. I apologize. Is to not let real estate take over or be a priority over all living things. And by that, I mean in other projects, we're preserving wetlands, we're watching out for endangered species, those sorts of things. And we hope to do that here in Canada. So our proposal, Oasis Sanctuaries, essentially is to create inland sanctuaries that will provide lifelong refuge, free of public spectacle, no breeding. And I want to just reinforce, the public will not have access to these sanctuaries. We created a proposal for Niagara Falls called Oasis of the Falls, which was a 250-acre dedication for this sanctuary. There were several components that went into this sanctuary. The first, which would run the perimeter of the sanctuary, would be an aquatic exercise channel, which would be about 2.5 miles long. And this would be a place for the dolphins and the belugas to, separately, of course, use the space to race, to run. We'd have waves and currents and things of that nature that would be built in from a technology perspective into this channel that would mimic the ocean. And of course, this is an inland sanctuary, it is not the ocean, but we would put things into place that would mimic that environment. Inside that perimeter, we have 2 lagoons, one for the belugas, one for the dolphins. Each would be about 30 acres. They would range from 30 to 50 feet in depth, so the animals have the opportunity to dive. We would put things into place like thermal gradients, so where it would induce diving almost, so they can get to cooler water below or warmer water above. Two other quick elements, one being the animal care facility, which would really be a call to all experts in the entire world. I want to reinforce, I'm not a marine expert at all. And the reason I've been speaking to many members of this community is because collaboration is absolutely key. This whole entire sanctuary will be built on science, built on the backs of specialists who can contribute their knowledge that they've been working towards all of their life. So the animal care facility would not only be a kitchen, but of course the 24/7 monitoring. We want to implement AI linguistics, behavioral learnings, all of this into this facility. And then on top of that, there will also be a university, Oasis University, where budding conservationists and experts alike can learn from these animals, which they really don't have access to in a naturalistic environment, only out in the wild. So it would really help with a little bit more of a hands-on learning environment. I know that as part of this and as a business person, we have to figure out how to pay for all of this. We're not relying on fundraising, and I commend anybody and anybody who does anything with fundraising. It's hard work, but from a business perspective, we wanted to look at it from a guarantee perspective. And so the master plan that we have created does have retail, it does have hotels, it does have experiences for families and adults alike. It does also have a data center, which will be put on the opposite end of the land at the sanctuary. What the data center does, it provides a financial, sustainable ecosystem. What that does, it produces revenue every single month that is going to be dedicated to the sanctuary. So the operations, the research, the care, the improvements, all is going to be taken care of in a guaranteed form. And I know that the words data center really got under people's skin, and I completely understand that. I want you to understand that we're looking to build this site in a very clean, technological way. Where we're at with it is we have presented it on almost every level of government, local and provincial. The response has been very strong, very good. We as a business suffer from the same thing as everybody else, is really trying to get the government to engage. We have had meetings with Premier Ford and Mayor Diodati and Associate Minister Oosterhoff and others. I think there's a pathway here. We have a plan, it's fully funded, and we're ready, willing, and able to go today. We could have had shovels in the ground today, but we have not had the engagement. So if everybody in this group can help promote that engagement, we're ready to go. We're ready to engage. So
Excellent.
thank you for your time. I appreciate
Thank you, Leah. So we're going to put your website in there, Oasis Sanctuaries. Folks can check that out as an option. Is there a place where they could look, Leah, to find out more about the specific Oasis Falls that you're proposing, or is that coming at some point?
Well, because the plan hasn't been approved by the
Yeah.
government, we wanted
Okay.
to keep it a little bit more zoomed out on the
Okay.
website, but I'm
Yeah.
more than happy to walk anybody through on a Zoom. Just connect with me. We'll set up time and I'll walk you through the whole plan in detail.
Love it. Thank you so much, Leah. We so appreciate your
Thank you
efforts.
guys. Appreciate it.
Amazing. Okay, so folks, we are at 8:30, and I know that we have some folks that are leaving, but we also have a few more things to cover. So I invite you to stay an extra few minutes. I know that a couple of our panelists do have to duck out. Camille, I think you're needing to duck out. And who else was it? Naomi, was it you that was needing? No, okay, good. Okay, because I still need to pick your brain. So thank you, Camille. And we're gonna make everybody else hang on here, okay?
Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so Melissa, we have not had a chance to talk about the land animals. There's just a lot of talk about the whales, sometimes the dolphins, because there is just so many logistics around it. It's so much harder to find solutions for them, but there are also hundreds of land animals. Can you tell us a little bit about them and how they factor into all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we believe there are hundreds. Again, Marineland's clouded in secrecy, and we have been asking for individual inventory of all the animals that are there, Marineland's plans for them and their health and welfare status, their current groupings, all kinds of information we'd like to have so we can help them. We believe there might be some bear, some elk, some fallow deer, seals, and sea lions. And it's heartbreaking. And again, the reason why Marineland was allowed to have so many animals when they had such substandard conditions and numerous complaints is because Ontario doesn't have strong enough zoo licensing attached to standards with proactive measures in place to phase out what we call roadside zoos. We would call Marineland a roadside zoo. We are trying our best to also collaborate with Marineland. I agree in principle that Marineland should pay for the future care of these animals, their immediate emergency needs. There has to be some accountability, and as Caitlin I think mentioned, or someone else, their property is worth a lot of money. And Caitlin mentioned the legal measures that can be taken to take that money to cover these costs. But I will say, if they're willing to reach out an olive branch and let animal welfare groups identify sanctuaries for some of the terrestrial animals and move them, we would gladly chip in for their future care. So, and I think we're seeing that kind of support come out from all around, which is really great. It can be a collaborative effort. We owe it to these animals to aim high and do better.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so now we've gotten some great questions in, and I wanted to address, some of the questions that have come up in the community in the last month or so. I mean, there are just so many competing views out there, folks, about what to do or not to do with the whales, and with all the online noise, it's hard to know what's what. So I just want to take us through some of the questions, some questions to try to clear up some misconceptions. So, Charles, first of all, the bay that you're building the sanctuary in was used for mining a long time ago. So I've just heard, people concerned about the quality of the water. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. From the 1880s to the 1930s, this area of Wine Harbor, the community where the sanctuary is, was a gold mining community. So certainly when we first came to the site, we were aware of that and started an evaluation of both the water and the land. So all of our studies of water, the actual water itself, have always shown it's a very pristine environment. There are no issues with the water. On land, there are residual gold mines, shafts and the like. There was an old gold mine stamp mill. But the process in Nova Scotia for dealing with that is you cap the land that is going to be exposed to any use. So that can be a dirt cap, a gravel cap, or concrete if you're putting in buildings. So all of that is part of the plan that's been submitted to the Department of Environment and accepted. Similarly, there were a few spots in the submerged soil, deep in the soil in one area where there was some residual arsenic and the like. Some arsenic is actually not harmful, some is. We've done all of those kinds of tests. All of the scientists have all come together and said, you leave that in place. You don't dig it up and try to remove it. It is sequestered in the soil. So all of these studies, there's some, I think, hundreds of pages of studies on our website that go to whalesanctuary.org. All of the studies are there. We have had to do that, most importantly, for our own due diligence, but also for the agencies that evaluate a project. So all of that work has been done. It's partly why it's taken this long, 3 years of environmental impact studies, as I said earlier. But all of that information is on the website, as is our fall status report that carries people through all of the timeline that has gone on all of this period. So yes, there are questions. We think we've done a very solid job in bringing in external experts as well as our own scientists and experts to demonstrate that this is a site in which whales can thrive.
Thank you so much, Charles. Naomi, there's been talk from some folks that China would have been the best thing for the belugas. You were there at Chimelong at the aquarium as recently as last year. What's your take on this theory?
China in general is not a good idea for whales and dolphins in captivity. The laws in China are very lax. They are poorly enforced, and some really rather horrific things have happened in China with regard to captive marine mammals and captive cetaceans in particular. I've been to China 5 times now, and I've been to Chimelong 3 times. And I can tell you the belugas there are dying off. And they can no longer be replaced except through breeding because the pipeline from Russia has been closed, at least for now. They have not been able to import any wild-caught belugas since 2018. And so any new animals that they have are, there's your cat. Any new animals they have are from breeding, which has been poor there. They have had to rely very heavily on Western input, Western expertise, either from the United States, SeaWorld veterinarian works for Chimelong as a consultant, or from Russia or elsewhere in Europe. And so they do not have a good breeding record. They definitely have a high mortality rate because they went from dozens of animals in the enclosures I visited in 2019 to far fewer when I was there in 2024. So they are unable to replace them from the wild anymore. They're not breeding them very well. There are 2 or 3 living captive-born belugas now at Chimelong. And, you know, they want more belugas because they can't replace them with their own captive breeding program. And so that would be a mistake because Chimelong looks great. It's like all the razzmatazz and all the blinking lights and all of the shiny newness, but you can see it crumbling already. The construction values in China are very, very low. They start some of their buildings will start falling apart as soon as they're completed, and salt water is very corrosive. And I visited a facility, not Chimelong, but another Chinese facility where I was certain it was at least 30 years old because of the condition of the actual concrete and other construction materials. It was 6 years old. So sending them there is sending them into a black hole of non-transparency, poor legal protection, and a lack of expertise.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay, Charles and Laurie, just question about, we can imagine that this is going to be a very costly project. So how do you plan to fund the ongoing operation of the sanctuary? I mean, it sounds like we've got the funds to buy the property or in escrow, but where do we go from there?
Now, this is a philanthropic effort. We have been blessed with a number of major donors. Often we call them angels, and also thousands of individual donors. It does take all of that to do a project of this nature. We need to raise $15 million, give or take. I mean, the numbers change all the time. People wonder why. Well, look at what's gone on just between the US and Canada. We were specking nets and specking our piping from which the nets hang in the US. Not any longer. Now everything has to come from Canada. So all of this pricing does change. It's not final until you have a bid from the vendor that you're doing the work with, but give or take $15 million that we still need to raise on top of what we have to really get this done. How do we do that? It has to be a global effort. And we certainly could do part of it, but truly we're looking for people to join with us. Who are the corporations that want to help sponsor this work, that want their name associated with doing what's right? Who are the individuals who can do so? When we had Keiko, there was one individual who did almost all of the Keiko work. Probably counting the tank that was built in Oregon, I would think $35 million 20 some years ago. Huge amounts of money. This doesn't take that. This is 15. But it does take people coming together, realizing that we can do it, and seeing that it is a model for the future. Canada has this issue today. It exists in Mexico for dolphins today. There are orcas and dolphins in France. There are other dolphins in Belgium. This is global, and we should do this as a global effort. Doesn't have to be our name on it. It is about the whales. Let's do it and do it together. It's going to take a lot of money, but as I said earlier, to do this right, we do need to be spending $1.5 million a month in the coming months. It's a tall order. But what else are we doing on Monday?
Caitlin, is there any possibility, would you say, that the federal or provincial government would be at all interested in funding, helping fund?
Yeah, I certainly hope that the urgency is just so significant, right? It's hard to overstate. And so Charles and Lori and others are going to do their best to, raise the money for this long-term plan. I think until the last few months, no one realized quite how urgent we need to get those whales out of there. And so I do hope that there might be a role for the federal government or provincial government if needed to help with, say, transfer costs or some of the care costs right now, as I've already mentioned. So certainly there's a role, but I know that Charles and Lori and others already have, this philanthropic plan in place. And so that's great. And I know that that's first and foremost the plan here, but this really is a problem. And if this goes south, this is going to be a stain on Canada's reputation for sure. If we just sit back, let things play out, delay unnecessarily, and animals die as a result, I don't think anyone wants to see that. So I do think that we have some responsibility as well to step up, and that our governments do. And as I said, first and foremost, what needs to happen right now is stepping up and helping these animals now. And Ontario can do that. And there are cost recovery mechanisms because, as Melissa said, there does have to be accountability here too.
And I think also that the more of this we do, the more places we start to create sanctuaries for cetaceans, we're going to learn so much about how to do this. And it probably won't be as expensive as it is now because we're going to know a lot more than we do now. So we need to come together to find ways to do this, to do it right, to do quality sanctuaries that are authentic. But, I just can't imagine, in a few years, how much more we're going to know about how to do this, but we need to get started.
Canada passed landmark legislation in 2019. Already other countries are using the model of the 2019 law, S203, as a model for the laws they are passing. Today, we have this particular crisis with Canadian belugas who have entertained millions of people and earned millions of dollars for their owners. We have a potential sanctuary in Nova Scotia. That's an arc of a story about how a country can pass the legislation, deal with a crisis, and have part of a solution that's really unique and the largest in the world. But that model can be a model for the world. And that's really what we're talking about. This is a huge problem, an emergency, a crisis, and there will be more. And we collectively, all the 400, 500 people on this call, and the thousands around the world who have made the legislation possible, come together to solve it.
So if you are the head of a big corporation out there, that's a great opportunity to be a groundbreaker here.
And, like, the nice thing too is that both at the federal level, the minister's public comments on this issue show that she truly cares as a human. She talked about going to the Marineland, looking in their eyes, and knowing that going to China would not be in their best interest. And we've criticized the province a fair bit on the call so far, and I think that's valid. But I would say publicly, the premier himself has also said that he personally does care. So I do feel like this is one of those issues where the feeling is there, the personal concern is there, and we just really need to translate that into action to protect the whales and make sure that the option of the sanctuary gets on track as quickly as possible.
Okay, so just a few more minutes because I just want to address a few questions that are actually very helpful and part of the last question I was going to ask. So wonderful animal advocates like Jenny McQueen, David Magna are asking, about some other forms of pressure. So would protests at Marineland work to garner local support? We did one recently and many came out. David's asking, are there any social or protest actions you'd recommend we take on our own for the Marineland belugas beyond the political efforts? And then Julie Hendren said, I am a teacher who supervises an environmental and social justice group of highly motivated high school students. Do you think letter writing campaigns by kids could help? And could we do a fundraiser? So any sort of feedback on any of these ideas?
Well, one thought, just as an example, we have some teachers in Texas, of all places, who are fourth, fifth, and sixth grade teachers. And they've been doing sanctuary work with their kids. Lori's been there, I've been there for a couple of years. They just did a letter writing campaign this week to Premier Ford. Now, when they did that to France, we weren't necessarily getting answers to our letters. The minister wrote to the teacher and the kids. Kids make a huge difference in this, and they get it right away. I mean, there's no, gee, I have to think about what's right. They're born thinking what's right. So those things, given that example, everything that can be done by teachers and students at all levels, I think politicians often listen to because they're overwhelmed by the things they hear from us. But getting some pictures drawn by a kid, they got to respond. They're human beings. Their hearts draw them to respond.
I agree. We worked with Bayview Glen Public School as well that wrote lots of letters, coloring books, tried to save Kiska. Their letters were rejected, and so we hand delivered them for them. And that makes another opportunity to showcase support with the kids, involve the kids in an advocacy opportunity. I would say that meaningful dialogue with your elected representative is more powerful than protests. But then again, I started from a protest. So there is a medium for everyone to attract them to this cause.
Yeah, yeah, I think a protest would have to be big enough and interesting enough to attract media out there. And yeah, sometimes it is a question of saying, could I put my efforts towards, gathering and promoting people phoning or emailing their MPPs or to the premier. But yes, Melissa.
Yeah, can I just say, if you live in Ontario and your MPP is a conservative and part of this governing party, you have tremendous influence right now. We need you to get all your neighbors together, your family members who live in the political riding, and really push that conservative MPP to help us, because that will really drive us. And I will say a lot of the opposition MPPs have been very supportive. So it's also good not to assume that they're not doing anything. I know MPP Wayne Gates is in the media pushing this, and other MPPs and other parties, they've all done their bit, and so it's good to recognize what they have done as well, and to encourage them to keep at it.
Excellent. Just a couple more questions. Laura asked, why can the sanctuary in Nova Scotia only take 10 whales? What are the reasons that are causing the limitation of only 10 and not potentially the full 30 whales?
Now, it's a great question. How do you figure out the capacity? So the way we've come at that is to look at the environmental carrying capacity of the environment based on the hydrologic studies of the currents, the waves, the way the water moves, how the tides change, all of that is part of looking at how well does the bay flush, because whales poop. And so you need to really make sure you're dealing with the environmental issues so that you create and maintain the environment for the welfare of the animals. So we've estimated 8 to 10 whales is the right number. Is it a precise number? No. There's not a lot of data to look at that precisely, but that's the number that we think, particularly right now with the work that we have to do going forward, is the right number to be talking about, rather than trying to say, okay, this is 100 times larger than all the tanks at Marineland combined, therefore we have to be able to care for all of them. Well, we could with artificial circulation kinds of things, mechanical work and the like, but let's keep the environment natural the way it is. Let's start with a plan that everybody can understand and stick with what we've been saying from an environmental carrying capacity standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you. Naomi, this might be one that you could address quickly. Lynn said, and this is a question or something I've heard a lot of people ask, are all of the belugas born in captivity, do any of them have a chance for release in the wild?
That's unknown. And so there is debate within the scientific community. I can't give you a solid answer. I can tell you that personally, I find it very difficult to believe that we know enough about these animals to be able to teach them how to be competent adults in the wild. They were born in a concrete box. Their mothers were caught from the wild many, many years earlier and may have skills that have atrophied to a certain extent, and they don't even have the opportunity to practice those skills in a concrete box. So I think the sophistication of these animals in the wild is beyond our ken at the moment. You know, we're learning stuff all the time. There's a lot we still don't know about these animals in the wild and their social structures and their mysterious lives at great depth. And so the idea that we can take an animal that was born in a box and give it enough information to allow it to be competent in the wild is a bit arrogant of us, in my opinion. And so I do feel very strongly that captive-born cetaceans, for now, at the level of our understanding of their lives out in the wild, we can't return them to the wild safely. We can't offer them, you know, maximum chance of survival out there. And I wouldn't release an animal without maximum chance of survival, you know.
Thank you,
And
Naomi.
so, yeah.
But
Excellent.
remember, they are highly social, cultural animals. They need to be in a society to thrive in the wild and a culture. And if that's not something that you can return them to, then that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. So another question that someone was asking is that the second, so we talked about the first sort of group going to whale sanctuary, and then we talked about the second group trying to find accredited facilities in the US or Canada, possibly in Vancouver, to send some of those that could be transported. So someone was asking, how do you determine and what are the steps towards that?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to start. I think Naomi,
Well, yeah, no, I mean, again, it's a matter of individual evaluation. Yeah, we, you know, we need to understand each individual and assess, you know, what they need to either return them to health or to, you know, provide them with maximum welfare, you know. So, you know, it's going to take a team of folks, you know, evaluating each individual.
And how do we sort of well, I mean, I guess two of the things that we would absolutely have to watch out for is no facility that's plans to breed them or make them do entertainment. Is that right, Caitlin? And so it would be more of almost like facilities offering sanctuary as opposed to buying
Yeah.
these belugas. Like what Marineland is trying to do is get top dollar that they can from a facility. And what this proposal, this part of the proposal is getting accredited facilities to basically give sanctuary to these animals. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, and I mean, our stance all along since the law passed was if there's discussion about sending a whale or dolphin from Marineland somewhere else, independent oversight is needed to ask some tough questions. Okay, how big are the tanks at the other facility? Well is the upkeep? What's the financial stability? So there are a lot of questions that I think need to take place. We can't just rush to sending them off to facilities, but you know, I do think that the likely reality is some will probably go to other aquariums. And so I think that those questions need to be asked, but again, in an independent way by facilities that don't have an economic stake in the transfer, just to make sure that we are doing the best thing possible for the animals, even if the best thing possible might be sort of limited in the circumstances.
I also think people should be aware of how much more we can do to enrich their lives when they're in a concrete box. They are not maximizing welfare at most dolphinaria, well, at any dolphinaria that I'm aware of. They, you know, they are built on a commercial model where, you know, putting on the show is the most important thing. And so if you choose to focus on the animal and the individual and their welfare rather than the welfare of the facility, I think there's a lot that is not being done at the moment that could be done to improve welfare. It's never going to be perfect, but it could be improved. And so if, again, there was some cooperation and some innovative projects where everybody who cares, you know, is allowed to participate and provide ideas and, you know, come up with methods to enrich the lives of these animals when they're in a concrete box, I think we could, you know, move the needle quite a bit in terms of welfare.
And just kind of
Thank
piggybacking on that a bit, if, you know, it's easy for us, particularly when Melissa talks about, okay, started as a protester at 15. We talk about all these experiences we've each had. And yes, that's been a huge improvement and a cause for making change. But we're at a stage where there are some crises. We're facing a crisis with these 30 animals. It is very easy to criticize the other. And I had the privilege of working with Jean-Michel Cousteau and his father for so many years. And Jean-Michel always says, if you're pointing your finger at someone, there are 3 pointing back at yourself. And so I think that's a helpful phrase to keep in mind, because we do need to all come together and find out what can we do for each individual. And it may not be what we would be as an individual choosing first. Might not be my first choice, but it's going to take a collaboration among all of us agreeing on what can we agree on, as opposed to getting hung up on what we don't agree on. And I think that's going to have to be what we do in animal welfare going forward anyway, because there is such a problem globally that it will take coming together in ways that we might not have thought possible.
And I think,
Yes, Melissa.
think it also takes everyone agreeing that putting these animals in a concrete box and forcing them to perform is not conducive to a life that they should be living, that they cannot thrive under those circumstances. And so we all have to at least agree that that kind of thing is not compatible with thriving. And therefore, start from there and let's try to figure out ways that we can make it better.
Melissa, you were.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that I 100% agree, and then this is all hands on deck. solution needed for this complex problem. And just wanted to point out that AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the American Association of Accredited Facilities, has publicly stated that they would support with a coordinated rescue of the beluga whales. So we've been encouraging that they be at the table as well. And we know that the people that know these animals best are also the animal care staff currently at Marineland. So these are all important people to come with the information they have, the perspectives they have. And I think we need to take some comfort in knowing that Canada did the right thing in 2019 and other countries are following our lead. And we're making this the last generation of animals that ever have to suffer for entertainment again. So the breeding restriction and entertainment restriction is really important in shifting the industry. But that interim, seaside sanctuaries are ideal, but that interim bit is really important to figure out. It's not so ideal, to keep them on land in tanks, but it might be the best we could do. There are 3,000 cetaceans in captivity, Naomi. Seaside sanctuaries are being just, created around the world. And it's really exciting. And I agree, like Whale Sanctuary Project will be the blueprint and there'll be shared learnings and it'll get easier, but it's never going to be a viable solution for all of those animals. And that's why the breeding restriction is so important, or else we're just growing this animal welfare crisis. And that's why China was the wrong thing. The federal fisheries minister did the right thing in denying the permit to China.
Yeah,
The last thing we want to do is breed more of this
that's right.
catastrophic problem, right? And when we are dealing with a catastrophic system, our solutions are going to be imperfect, but we must go ahead and do our best with the knowledge we have. So folks, I just want to say you've stayed with a lot. We still have like plus 300 people staying with us to the bitter end. And I big thank you to the speakers for our guests here for being with us and being bright-eyed till the end as well. Hannah Williams also wrote in and said, I work for Defense of Animals, and we would love to direct our supporters to encourage the Ontario government to take action on the health assessments. Hannah, we will be in touch with you. We are going to include the action to your MPPs and to Doug Ford in the replay email that's going to go out shortly, folks. And I heard through a lot of direct messages that people got their calls through. Apparently, people are answering the phone at Doug Ford's office right now. I had no idea. It said their office hours were just till 5 p.m., but they talked to them. So you have your marching orders, everybody, according to your last name, to pick up the phone and call Doug Ford in the next week, according to your last name, or just whenever you can do it. But that's the general sort of gist that we want to do. I just want to sort of leave with Marie Louise, who said, hearing the description of the bay where the belugas and other whales will live makes me so very happy, as it did for me. And just knowing that there are so many collaborators and so many beautiful people here trying our best to make this happen for the whales, the dolphins, and all the other animals that are at Marineland. Kirsten, can we take everybody off spotlight? And I'm actually going to get you to unmute for a second to do the unmute, folks. We are, I just sort of want to make sure that everybody here knows that what they have to do to get to work. Let's get all these animals out of harm's way and into a future worth living, folks, so we can hear the numbers and power behind these animals. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute. Are you with us, folks?
Yes.
Give me an answer.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much for being here, compassionate ones. Thanks again to the panelists. I look forward to seeing all of you at our next Animal Justice event.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you very much, panelists. Everybody, time for the animals. See you next time.
Thank you
Good
for all
night,
your work.
everyone.
Bye.